Thanks everyone very much. I appreciate our hosts at America First, the teams at both America First and the Abraham Accords Peace Institute for the work to make today a reality, and also to our distinguished guests and all of those in attendance here physically and virtually. We'll dive in because time is precious and we've got a lot of ground to cover, and we're fortunate in being blessed with distinguished guests in order to do it. Even if you don't get our monthly newsletter, and I hope that you do, I think it's been plain to all that the progress made by the Abraham Accords members in the past 2 years has been extraordinary. That was, of course, the expectation, but there is a tremendous amount of work that lies in front of us, as was discussed earlier. I think what we'd appreciate from our panel members today is their insight into what we can expect based on their diverse fields and expertise and their long-term exposure to the region. And so there's been progress, but I guess, again, the potential here is what we'd like to spend our time on. Our first question goes to Ambassador Sands, and will relate to the field of energy. Israeli companies Enlight and NewMed announced a plan last month just to jointly develop, fund, build, and manage renewable energy projects across the Middle East and North Africa, including Morocco, the Emirates, Bahrain, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Oman. Last year, Mubadala Petroleum signed a deal with Israel's Delek Petroleum, forging a partnership in the Eastern Mediterranean. How can the Accords members build on the collaboration begun to develop critical solutions to European markets struggling to overcome the loss of Russian gas following their invasion of Ukraine? Ambassador.
Well, thank you for the question. It's an important one. Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014. So they've had a hot war there for a long time. This should come as no surprise to any of us. But now we have the tremendous escalation and the crisis for energy for the EU that's unprecedented. In most of our lifetimes, we haven't seen such a terrible situation. And certainly American natural gas can be part of the answer to this crisis for the EU. But I think we should also look at the Eastern Mediterranean. You know, they've discovered just not that long ago the Zohr, the Leviathan, the Tamar, and the Aphrodite fields. And this natural gas exploration between just Cyprus and Israel is capable of replacing about 20% of what Russia was supplying to the EU. They're capable of supplying up to 25 billion cubic meters per year to the EU. So that's exciting. But there are more potentials even undiscovered in the region. And we're having some obstacles in integrating the Abraham Accord members into the global energy markets. Part of the problem is the United States and Europe are reluctant to view natural gas as a long-term sustainable solution to meet the demands that Europe has. But we know natural gas is cheap, it's plentiful, and it's abundant, and it's clean. It's for years, the harvesting and transport of natural gas and energy has been unfairly scrutinized, as financial institutions have worked to diversify away from fossil fuels, and the result has been delays and abandonment, killing deals for critical infrastructure. If you look at projects like the East Med natural gas pipeline, it was directly linking Eastern Mediterranean and their abundant resources with Europe. And despite Western opposition, the Abraham Accords have created the space to attract majors like Chevron, Noble, and many other companies to invest in the region. In fact, you mentioned the Mubadala investment from Abu Dhabi. One of their sovereign wealth funds has invested $1 billion in the Israeli Tamar field. And we also see that we need resources coming in to increase the regional cooperation so that they can maximize their opportunity, their financial opportunity in the region. And now we have the establishment of the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum. It's a multilateral public-private organization that's focusing on regional growth. And it's complementary to the Abraham Accords. And European nations and the EU are keenly interested in this organization. But to realize the potential more fully, we need more cross-border investment, and we need to attract foreign direct investment for regional infrastructure growth and also for marketing the opportunity. Delivering the resources of the region requires a partnership with nations outside of the borders of the Eastern Mediterranean. And we have the U.S. Beyond supplying our world-class know-how and our innovation, can correct our trajectory of public-private divestment by signaling support of regional natural gas projects. So in Europe, for Europe, it has to view the Abraham Accord members and the resources that they offer as mutually beneficial long-term relationships, not just a temporary off-ramp from Russian energy. So Europe's solution, we believe, lies in the diversification of sources, of supplies, and of routes. And the U.S. will continue to grow our role as a supplier, but so should members of the Abraham Accords.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. We look forward to
Thanks.
the work that you and your center will do. And we certainly agree that integrating our partners and allies in the region with those in Europe is certainly to the betterment of us all and would be perhaps a better strategic dependency. Ambassador Bryan, I know you just returned from the region, and it is ironic in a sense that we're witnessing a land war in Europe for the first time in a half century, and we're here to celebrate genuine peace in the Middle East between Israel and its Arab neighbors for the first time in a generation. How do you see the Accords enabling its members to achieve long-term goals, all of which are, in many cases, convergent? And how can the United States and our partners and allies sustain and expand the progress made?
Well, thanks, Rob. Yeah, thank you, Rob. And the coach will understand this. You're only as good as your team. And at the NSC, we had a great team. And Rob really led a tremendous group of men and women. Miguel Correa, Mark Vandroff was one of the other senior directors, and a whole host of folks I can't even mention that helped me get my job done. So thank you, Rob, for your tremendous work on the Accords and all that you've done. And it's great to be on the stage when we talk about how we accomplished so many things diplomatically during the Trump administration. It's because we had some fantastic ambassadors, and we've got Bob here, Rob Lighthizer, and John and Carla, and I think David Fisher is over there, I see, and Jim Jeffries. We've got a bunch of great ambassadors here, and so thank you for all that you did. Let me start for just a moment, and Jared touched on this, as he began, I think his first or second answer. And let's just focus on peace for peace sakes for a moment. I mean, we talk about the geopolitical implications of the Abraham Accords, and they're important, and I'll discuss those. We talk about the economic issues that Carla laid out. But let's just talk about peace for a moment. So my faith in the 5th chapter of the book of Matthew, Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the peacemakers because they'll be the sons of God, or be called the sons of God. And we've got a lot of peacemakers in the room today, and I'll mention some of them in just a moment. But it's really an important thing to sometimes step back and just think about for humanity what the Abraham Accords mean, and not just what it means to us economically or geopolitically or how we're going to contain Iran or compete with China. And so I said something to the president. I had just returned from a mission to Turkey. I was fairly new in my role as National Security Advisor. And as some of you may recall, the Turks were going to invade Syria. Our Kurdish allies were kind of in the way of their plans. And so I went to Syria with a number of people, the Vice President, the Secretary of State. Jim was there, and we spent a long couple of days negotiating with the Turks, trying to save the lives of our Kurdish allies. And in one night, we saved about 8,000 lives. We were able to exfiltrate Syrian Kurdish allies of ours through Turkish lines that night. And Jim Jeffries spent a lot of time with General Mazloum on the sat phone while we were negotiating with President Erdogan. And we got that done, and I was quite proud of it. The media didn't give us a lot of the credit that we deserved for that, and it was the president deserved for sending us over there and getting that done. And I came back and I saw President Trump, and I said, Mr. President, I knew some of the things that we had on our agenda. We wanted to get peace in Afghanistan, working with Secretary Pompeo and Ambassador Khalilzad. We wanted to get Serbia-Kosovo done with Ambassador Grenell. We wanted to heal the Gulf Rift, which was a problem with our Arab allies. Obviously, the Abraham Accords were on the agenda. So I told the president, I said, Mr. President, I think when this is over And I guess we didn't know if there'd be a second term at the time, but I said, when your time as president's over, I think you're going to be known as a peacemaker. And the president kind of looked at me and gave me a funny look, and I don't think he wasn't quite sure what to make of that. And when I saw him the last day in office, I was one of the people to say goodbye to him at the White House the morning of the 20th. I said, do you remember when I said you'd be a peacemaker, and that's what your legacy would be? He looked at me and said, well, you may have been right. And I think we were, and I think celebrating the Abraham Accords today really is one of the great legacies of a very accomplished administration, but something that 50 years from now, 100 years from now, 150 years from now, people are going to write about and talk about. And so one other quick thing, I was on the flight, the first flight, Rob was on the flight, Jared and I were up in seat 1 and 2. I put out a picture of us, and it got about 12 retweets. Jared put out a tweet, and it got, 20,000 retweets, and including an email from my mom who said, I see you're on the plane with Jared. And I said, well, did you see that from my Twitter? She said, no, I saw it on Jared's Twitter account. And it's a good picture, so that was good. But it was an older I think we were on a 737. It was an older plane, and it had the little map up in front, and it showed us crossing into Saudi airspace. And the pilot came on first in Hebrew and then in English, said, we've now crossed into Saudi airspace. And I looked over, and our Israeli colleagues, a couple of them were crying, and some of them were very teared up. And these were security guys. We were doing a national security trilateral event. That was the reason for the trip. And Meir Ben Shabbat, who was the national security advisor of Israel at the time, he's a tough guy, but he looks like your friend's rabbi. He's an older guy who has his kippah on, and he was all teared up. And I got kind of a bad sense of humor sometimes. I said, look, Meir, let's face it, this isn't the first time an Israeli jet has flown over Saudi Arabia. And he looked at me and he said, yes, but it's the first time we've been invited. And I think that said it all. And it was a privilege to be there with Jared. And this wouldn't have happened without Jared. And that was a great. There were many things that happened with that flight. Something we'll remember. And it was great landing in Abu Dhabi and getting down off the stairs. And John and Terry Ricolta, who are longtime friends of ours, met us at the bottom of the staircase and welcomed us to Abu Dhabi. And it was a great trip, and so I want to thank them. I want to thank Ambassador Oteba for his work on the peace process. It wouldn't have happened with Yosef without you. In fact, I probably wouldn't have been National Security Advisor if it wasn't for Yosef, because he helped me get hostages back, and so he's done a lot for this country, and we're grateful for that. But it was also the leaders, not just President Trump, and I said this at the time, I thought it took not just political courage, but it took physical courage, which is something that we don't celebrate these days. To be a peacemaker in the Middle East. So for Bibi Netanyahu, for the Crown Prince, now the President of the UAE, MBZ, for King Hamad, for King Mohammed in Morocco. Look, peacemakers haven't done well. I mean, we look at what happened to Yitzhak Rabin. We look at what happened to Anwar Sadat. It's very dangerous to make peace in the Middle East. And I thought these leaders that came together and made peace did it at personal risk, not just how the street would respond, but to their own lives. And so that was impressive. Obviously, this wouldn't have happened without Jared's leadership in the White House. And I'll tell one story. I probably shouldn't do this. I don't know if the president will be happy about this or not, but we're only on national TV, so it's okay. But Jared had asked me to go talk to the president about an issue, and it was something I agreed with, and it was something that Rob and his team were working on. So it wasn't out of the ordinary. But I won't mention the issue, but it had to do with the peace process. And I went in and told the president in the dining room, and he looked at me and he said, "Jared put you up to this, didn't he?" I said, "No, sir, this is our NSC, this is our best analysis of the NSC." And of course, before I could respond, Jared walks into the dining room and said, "Hey, what are you guys doing in here?" The president just looked at me and said, "Get out of here." And so we left, and I looked at Jared. I said, "I think that's a yes." And he said, "I think it is too." And so we kind of moved the ball forward a little bit. But he did tremendous work. Secretary Pompeo did a great job, and Secretary Mnuchin, Director Haspel, Avi, who's out here, Avi Berkowitz, was tireless and was running around all over the region. Brian Hook at the State Department. I mentioned our NSC team, and then we had some great ambassadors on the ground: Ambassador Fisher, Ricolta, Ambassador Friedman. So we just had a really amazing team of folks that made this happen, and I think all of you who were involved in this process, more important than any medal that you received or any accolades for it, is to know in your heart that you were a peacemaker and helped bring people together. And I just got back from the region, and when folks talk about how enduring the Accords were, Rob talked about that, Jared talked about it, people in the region have changed because of the Abraham Accords. So now let me get to the geopolitics of it, and I'll try and wrap up quickly because I know we're limited on time. Number one, there were two things that kept me awake at night as National Security Advisor. And folks used to ask, what are the great threats to the United States? And I'd say, there's one immediate threat, and that's the Islamic Republic of Iran. And there's one existential long-term threat, and that's the People's Republic of China and the Communist Party of China. And it's interesting how the Accords play a role in both those, because by bringing our Gulf Arab allies and Israel together, we have an alliance that can be a counterweight to Iran, that can stand up to Iran, that can help us, and hopefully we won't enter into another JCPOA deal. It was bad. The first one was bad. This one's worse. But the Accords provide a framework. It's not a new NATO, but it provides a framework for cooperation in the region that helps us stand up to Iran's economic activity, their terrorist activity, their nuclear activity, their military adventurism. And so that's a great thing for the region, but that benefits America tremendously. And then I'll point something out with China that's very important. If you haven't been to Tel Aviv lately, it's the second Silicon Valley. I mean, every time you get in front of your computer, you're dealing with software or hardware that was in part manufactured or developed or researched in Israel. Israel has become a tech, bonanza, and it's good for investors. It's good for the economy of Israel. But in our competition with China, it's a tech competition, and America can't do it alone. And Israel is our great ally on that front. Now, as we made it harder for Chinese companies to invest in America, as we made it harder for Chinese companies to steal our IP, which they've been doing rampantly, as we made it harder for them to come buy American tech companies, we haven't figured out how to keep them from buying the farmland next to our military bases, but we'll get to that. But at least we stopped them in tech. As we stopped them in tech, they started going to Israel. And Israelis are entrepreneurs, and they'd leave the IDF, and they'd want to start their own cyber firm or their own tech firm. And the Chinese were investing. Now what's happened with the Abraham Accords is the investors are coming from the Gulf. They're coming from places like Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and there are two exciting capitals in the world these days. When you travel, you see Tel Aviv, which is exciting. There's cranes everywhere, and then you go to Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and you see the excitement that's happening there. And it's the sort of thing we saw in Singapore in both cities 20 years ago. But they're the hot new cities. And what we've done is we've brought these cities together. So we have these finance guys and these entrepreneurs and tech guys and gals in Abu Dhabi and Dubai teaming up with their colleagues in Israel. And what it's done is in many ways, it's pushed the Chinese out, because the Chinese are always predatory on their investment and their loans, and the Israelis can get a fair deal with the folks in the Emirates or Bahrain or Morocco. And so we're seeing a geopolitical benefit that I don't think folks focused on when we entered into the Abraham Accords, but now we're seeing in our tech battle and our competition with China, we're seeing this tremendous advantage that's accrued to the United States because of the peace that was made. So I'll end with that. Thank you, Robin. Great to be on the panel with Carl and the coach and John. It's an honor for me to be here with so many good friends. It's kind of like a reunion for some of us to see each other and to celebrate Aria. Thank you. And so many people contributed to this great peace deal and the accords that took place. And I think all of us who were there on the lawn of the White House on that sunny day and watched the leaders sign the accords, we'll never forget that. And hopefully our kids and our grandkids and their kids won't forget it either. So thank you all. God bless you. And Rob, thank you for your great question. I hope I answered it at least in part.
Always, sir. Always, sir. Thank you very much. And certainly that strategic vision guided and continues to inform the development of the Accords, but the foundation is peace. We've talked about the energy component of this. We talked about the geostrategic expertly. I think there are other domains. Ambassador Rakolta, as we look at the other aspects of the economies that are now integrated across the Accord countries, there's significant market activity, as Ambassador O'Brien mentioned, across the region. There's rapid growth in the construction sector, which few know better than you. And escalating costs, though, continue to constrain it to a certain extent. Price increases, imported materials, project delivery constraints widespread throughout the region and globally. Raw material prices, steel included in that, have increased as well. Shipping costs have increased dramatically. Many argue it's unsustainable. From your perspective, where do you think the challenges and opportunities in global markets broadly and how the Accords member countries can chart a path under the current environment.
Well, thank you, and I guess this is on. Okay, thank you very much. My other panel members, great to be here with you. Before I get started on answering that multi-part question, I just want to thank Jared and just give a little insight into what it's like working for him. I had not known Jared all that well. We met once during the campaign. I had a mutual friend, shared some stories, but really never talked much about where we were going with this. And then I find myself, just before going to post, being invited to the White House by the National Security Advisor O'Brien here, and marched me into the president's office and to have a short conversation. And I was really impressed. I had met President Trump a couple times in the past and found him nothing like the press had described him. He was energetic. He was a great listener, asked very, very insightful questions. We talked a lot about the auto industry in which I build plants across the world. So he wanted to see me just before I left, and I went and sat down next to him, and he looked at me, talked a little bit, and then he asked me two very important questions. One, what are your priorities? I begged off, said I'd like to get there for 60 days and see what the Emiratis had to say before I start talking about priorities. Second question, what can I do to help you? I was stunned by that. I was really not all that prepared, hadn't thought that that question would be asked. But I knew that the Emiratis were looking to get into a very, very important weapons program. That sort of spoke to the fact that if you got into this weapons program, you would be a top strategic ally of the United States. Not only was the weapons program important, but being admitted to it was just as important. There's a level of trust that is beyond anything else two countries can do. And I struggled for what I might say, and I asked, would we admit them into a confidential briefing for this weapons program? And the president, and by the way, the administration, there was all these points of view about whether yes or no, with the president for it or against it. The former national security advisor had made some comments about it. There was a lot of consternation in the administration. And so I asked, can we give them this confidential briefing? And the president, without batting an eye, waved his hands and said, yes, we can. And that gave me all kind of strength to go out there knowing full well that the president had my back. As I'm walking out of the Oval Office, I get a little note on a little piece of paper and said, stop by and see Jared Kushner before you leave. So I go into his office. By the way, he has an office where he has a standing desk, no place to sit. And the office is all of 6 by 6 feet. I mean, it can only fit two people in there, you and he. And so he's busy working away. I go in there and I look at him and he said, hey, John, how you doing? I said, fine, I'm on my way to Abu Dhabi. He said, I got 4 words for you, or 3 words. Fix Expo Dubai. And I looked at him and I said, Jared, you need $60 million to fix it, and our Congress has already told us we're not getting it. He said, you'll figure out a way. And that, along with the president, really showed me the kind of support that this administration apparently gave to all the people that work for it. And I don't think they get enough credit about how good of bosses they were in approach toward the country that I went to, and obviously the rest of the administration. So Jared, thank you very much for the confidence that you put into me. Construction, what a boring topic, right? I never thought you'd ask a question like that. So let's talk about the pressures that are building in the construction industry today. Yes, there is absolute rampant inflation going on right now. The inflation is, we measure it on a year-to-year basis in my company. It's 25% year over year. Certain commodities like steel have doubled in 18 months. This has put a tremendous pressure on the entire global market. Secondly, people have been building like crazy, and it's really a tale of two cities. Certain industries, automotive, battery electric vehicle, are building like you've never seen before. Other industries, retail, apartments, housing, are falling flat. And why is that? The cost is too high, and we are now facing this rapid increase in our interest rates. So those two factors are putting a lot of strain on the industry today. And so for most of the contractors who are in the industry, the word today is to survive for the next upturn, because I think we're going to have some very, very hard headwinds. I don't believe we're going to have a soft landing, and it's going to cause, and unfortunately contractors are the last guy in line to get paid, and so you've got to protect your liquidity, protect your talent, and protect your processes. Now, strategically, construction is the second largest industry in the world. Over $15 trillion a year is spent on construction on an annual basis. The only industry that's larger is services, financial services. And it plays a very, very outsized role in the development of almost any country, especially developing countries. Because what comes along with construction? Better infrastructure, better roads, better water, better waste, better housing. And of course, when you take a look at MENA, which is the Middle East, North African area, what you find is that these countries, Israel, the UAE, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, are rapidly transforming their economies away from oil and gas. And in order to do that and to be attracted to the industries that they're most interested in building upon, all of these industries require new facilities, big, new, complicated facilities, whether it's telecom or manufacturing, food, fintech, infotechnology, life and health sciences, medical tourism, you name it, you need new buildings. And if you ever came to the UAE, and especially Abu Dhabi, you'd see two of the greatest hospitals in the world. The Emiratis have spent billions of dollars building a new Cleveland Clinic and a new Mayo Hospital, almost 1,000 beds and the top equipment that you could possibly imagine. So my whole point of this is that in order for the region to really move forward, we need to have more stability. That stability has to come in interest rates, and it has to come in the inflation rate, because contractors and the industry can't price on unpredictability. So bottom line, I think that construction will continue to play an outsized role in the entire world, but also in the Middle East. And it's one area where you have a lot of cross-border trade, employment going back and forth. And I think the future is very, very bright. We just got to get through this short-term problem that we see.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Appreciate it. And so, Coach, before the buzzer sounds, it's not often that we get a coach off the sidelines and onto the court, and usually the result is a fine is levied after the fact. So we're hopeful today that we'll be able to hear from you based on your recent experience and your past experience in the region, how sports has become a bridge and how it can play a stronger role in integrating the cultures and the peoples and the countries represented in the Abraham Accords. We'd love your thoughts on it, Coach.
Well, if you're sitting there wondering, what is a basketball coach doing up here? So am I. What am I going to do? Teach the Israelis and the Abraham Accords countries to rebound better, maybe shoot the ball better, right? We're talking about energy and geopolitics and construction. So I'm coming at it, I guess, from a little different angle. I am an American Jewish college basketball coach in Auburn, Alabama. How great a country do we live in? And I'm grateful. I am blessed, and I am grateful for that opportunity. And I also, being Jewish, I care greatly about the state of Israel. And I know, having a family of Holocaust survivors, that had Israel been what it is today, back then, how many more hundreds of thousands of Jews would have survived the Holocaust because they had some place to go other than just here and a few other countries that welcome them. So its safety and security and peace with its neighbors are just absolutely vital and important to me. America, I love this country. And when America, I believe, is strong, the world is better off. The world is a better place when America is strong. By the same token, if America is not strong, it's not better for the world. And in particular, being Jewish, when things aren't great in the world, historically, they've not been great for the Jewish people. And so I want to see America great. And I want to see, America continue to be a great ally of Israel's. There was a time many, many years ago when Israel may not have been a great ally. They may have been a bit of a burden. They weren't as strong economically as some of their neighbors. There's not a very large Jewish voting bloc, so on and so forth. But today, Israel is a great ally of the United States of America. And I think the Abraham Accords, You know, in coaching, like, if I could do enough as a coach and a teacher to earn the respect of those that I respect, like the great Pat Summitt, who coached at Tennessee, or the great Pat Dye, who was a legendary football coach at Auburn. And so what I would say to you in the room, those of you that did this, would Golda Meir be proud of you? Would Anwar Sadat be proud of you? Would Yitzhak Rabin be proud of you? And the answer is absolutely yes. So the question is, what do we do with it now, with energy and with geopolitics and with construction? How do we take advantage of it? You know, so for me, in sports, two things. When we take the court on the playground, we don't see color. We don't see black or white. Can you guard? Can you make a shot? It doesn't matter what religion you are. And so couldn't our kids teach us a great deal about playing on the playgrounds and the ability to get along and compete and know who the opponent is? And so oftentimes, you know, we don't know that. And then for me, you know, the things they say you don't ever talk about religion and politics, because you just can't win, right? That's all I talk about is religion and politics. And so for me, I see the Middle East, and particularly I see Jerusalem, as a place that should bring us together and not divide us. I look at Abraham as the father of all nations, and I get the Ishmael and Isaac, and I understand that, but doesn't that make us brothers? It does. Or growing up in New England, you know, dealing with anti-Semitism, this is not what you expected, was it? I know it's not.
I handed you the ball, Coach.
But I'm not staying in the coaching box, am I? But I look at, and you know, I was told for years that my people killed Christ, their God, and that was terrible. And then the more I grew in my own faith, and I realized, wait a second, Jesus was Jewish, right? By the way, you know my wife's two favorite Jews are in the world? Me and Jesus. Doesn't that bring us together? So the reason why I'm talking to you like this is I'm a coach. My job is to bring my team together. When we get on the same page, it's amazing the things that we can do. So I'm here to challenge you to take what you've started, and just, Ambassador Bryan, just like you said, oh my goodness gracious, the possibilities and how the Middle East can help the United States compete with the rest of the world and make China a lot less relevant in a lot of areas because of the technology and the resources and the workforces that exist. So basketball-wise, here's what I want to do. I took my team to Israel this summer. I got 7 kids baptized in the Jordan River. Yep, it was an amazing experience. Yep. They went to Tel Aviv and saw an amazing beach city with high technology and beautiful people of all different shapes, sizes, and colors. And so they're going to hear things about Tel Aviv or about Israel that may hear from the media or social media, and now they can make up their own minds about what that's all about. And what I would love to see happen, so last year we went to Israel. This is what I'm working on. I'm working on taking college basketball teams next year to UAE, to Dubai, and play some games there. And then get on a plane and go to Tel Aviv and play some games there. And create the Abraham Accords Cup. And have it be something that is just normal, something that's normal. And then by bringing like ESPN alongside us and just see, yes, this is how it is now. And this is how it can be in the future. Jared, you are so right for taking on this challenge and surrounding yourself with amazing people. Peace through prosperity, through people. Israel is doing this because it's in its best interest. United Arab Emirates and Morocco and Bahrain are doing this because it's in their best interests. And it's in the best interests of their people. And that's what this should be all about.
We covered a broad spectrum today because
Rob,
agreements. Sir.
Thank you for not making us follow the coach. That was terrific. And let me just say one other quick thing. There's obviously a big headline that's going on. We're watching the mourning and the ceremonies for the Queen, for Queen Elizabeth II. And so on behalf of Brooke and everybody at the Institute, Jared and all of us up here, our condolences to the people of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and the Commonwealth on the loss of Queen Elizabeth II. She was a great leader who served her country for 70 years, wore herself out in the service of her country. and was a good friend of the president's as well. President Trump had a great relationship with Her Majesty. I'll just say one quick thing. Jared and I had the opportunity to be at the NATO summit at the end of 2019. And for some reason, at the end of the evening, we ended up wandering around Buckingham Palace. We didn't have our security details, and there was no one around us. And Jared looked at me and he said, "This is pretty crazy. We've got an American Jew and a Mormon walking around, unescorted in Buckingham Palace." And of course, as soon as he said that, 3 people showed up and said, "Gentlemen, well, this way," and found our way out. But we do. We're grateful for everything the Queen represented, and our condolences go out to her family, the royal family, and to the people of the United Kingdom. And I think I said that on behalf of everyone here on the panel and the Institute as well. So thanks, Rob.
Thank you, sir. Well said. We covered a broad scope of terrain today, and we thank our experts on the panel and would ask you to do the same because the accords we're here to commemorate cover an equally large amount of terrain. So please please join me in thanking our panel members today. Thank you very much.
There was nothing like sports diplomacy when we were at Coast.
Everything needs a coach.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.